Hi, and welcome to episode 2 in our series on how to build a map in the Hegemony 3 map editor. In our last episode, we looked at how to import height fields, build terrain, paint the terrain, and add some water. Today we're going to be looking at how to add unit path regions onto the map. So these control where your units are allowed to move on the map, so they have a significant impact on gameplay. When we turn on the unit mode here, which is path region mode, that shows, you can see these red boxes on the terrain. Those are some we've placed already. So units are allowed to move inside these boxes. And so when you issue a movement order in the game, you're telling the units to move from one box to the other. And the AI systems do their pathfinding between these regions. So we're going to be filling in today this area of Lower Macedonia, which is the start of the Hegemony Gold campaign. Players who played the first game might recognize this is where the city of Aegea is, and your units usually start right about here and cross this river. So one of the first things we do when creating a new map is often place the important features, like cities. So now that we've got the path region mode selected, we're going to hit the draw tool here, and we're going to draw in some of our cities. So as I said, Aegea is here. One of the first cities you come across is the little town of Amathia, which is across the river. In this version of the map, we're going to place it up a little more in the hills. So we're going to rough that in there. So we place path regions like we did water regions in the first video. You use the draw tool up here and place corners with the left mouse button, and once you connect back to the first point, you will complete the region. So the number of sides on a region show the number or where the boundaries will be of the city, or the walls. And we can change these later, but this gives us a good starting point. One of the next major cities is Edessa, which is right at the mouth of this mountain pass here. So it's a bit more of an important city, so we're going to draw it a little bit bigger. There are no real limits to how big the city is. You can decide depending on what the game you're creating is. So we'll rough that in for now. Now you can move corners by switching to the move tool up here and left clicking on a corner and dragging it around. One difference you notice from the water regions in the last video is path regions are all stuck to the terrain because you only move relative, like on the ground. So you can only control them in 2 dimensions. So then we will draw the next city up here, which was Elmopia. Draw that up here against the mountains. And then the biggest city in the opener was Pella, the new capital of Macedonia, and we're going to put that up here against the mountains. In the original game, you might remember it was out in the field, but in order to allow a little more maneuvering, we're going to put it up against here so it doesn't break up the terrain as much. So, put that about here. And again, we can change this a little later as we set up the rest of the map. So, moving back to the beginning where we started here with Aegea, let's start filling in some of the regions around these cities. So we've got a path coming over the mountain pass here. So I'm just going to continue that roughly in here. Now you can see it doesn't look like a movable region. That's because we usually place these the pathfinding first and then go back and tweak the terrain to match it once we've settled on how we want the game to move. Now, we'll connect it up to our city. Now, like the water regions we talked about last week, path regions do need to be convex, meaning there's no interior corners. And that's because units move from edge to edge. So units coming out of the city here need to be able to go out to this edge here in order to go down that path. So you can't have an interior corner like that, so where you wouldn't be able to see that edge from here. Okay, and we will connect that up. Let's do here. The players will remember that there's a river crossing here, so we're going to connect that up like that. And that'll let us talk about another point. You can see some of the numbers in the middle. The most important one is the L. The others are kind of ID numbers for the region. So the L means this is a land region. So when we left click in the middle and select it, you can see land is checked. Now because this is a river crossing, particularly a ford that we don't necessarily need a bridge, we're going to click ford. That changes the color and puts a little F in there. So the other region types are marsh and alpine and water, and we'll get into those a little bit, but they each control how units are allowed to move through that. The marsh and the alpine particularly are seasonally based. They change the rules depending on the current season. Now, one of the other important factors of placing path regions is you want the corners to be wherever possible on the edges of the terrain rather than out in the middle, because units are not allowed to move through corners of path regions. So if I was to do this, say, for example, put a couple extra ones in here. So this wouldn't be a good idea, because this corner here out in the middle of this plane, units would not be allowed to move through there, so they would always move around this corner, which doesn't make any sense when it's out in the middle of a plane like this. So we'll delete those quickly using the delete key, and we'll go back in. So we'll put the corners up against obstacles like the mountains or the water. And we'll continue this along here. Now we won't do the water regions right now, but basically the same system applies. So you can build the regions out into the water where you want ships to be able to land. We'll fill that in down the rest here. Now it's generally for optimization to make the pathfinding as efficient as possible. We try to limit the number of sides on these boxes. Try to no more than necessary to map to the terrain. We'll do one more in the middle here. Actually, we can go all the way over. It's not too big. And while this doesn't look too traversable right now, I think we can smooth that out later and add a little more movement there. So we got this Edessa here in the mountains. Talked about where we want to connect it up to that pass there. So we'll continue that in here. Like I said, we'll smooth that out later once we're happy with the movement. That a little bit wider. And remember, there's a big opening here into, oops, I missed the corner. Like the water regions, if you right click, you can, it'll delete your current one, you can start again. So build that up. It's very important to make sure your path regions actually connect to each other. Otherwise, units will not be able to move between them. Okay. And we'll connect this one up. There. Players of the original game might remember there's one of the first mines you get in the game was up in this corner, so we'll put a path region in for that. And we will connect this up. So we're going to have another pass through the mountains here. Kind of looks like that might be a route there, so I'm going to rough it in, kind of going up around this edge. And for now, we will just leave it like this until we get around to the other side. And it'll take a little moment to do a few little terrain tweaks while we're going through here. Now, because of the recreating the original map, we want only this part to be traversable, but it's not quite clear why you can't move over this, so we're going to tweak the terrain there a little bit. So switching back to our terrain mode. Now, you see that gets rid of our path regions, but we can actually turn them back on through the draw list. Clicking on that brings up a list of different draw layers here. We're going to find path regions and click show. It turns those back on. We'll close our list. And that lets us tweak the terrain while we can still see the path regions. So we're going to go to a raise lower command that we showed last week. Scale. Get a slightly bigger brush here. Not quite that big. And we're going to bump this up so it looks a little more, you can see why only this part is the crossing. And we can update our textures there by going to the terrain painting, picking our Latium Mountains, and updating that a little bit. It's a little more rocky. Alright, now we'll switch back to our path region mode. So we're going to finish up here and connect into Pella. It's the big capital city. So connect in there. You can see that kind of goes up over the mountains a little bit too much, so we're going to pull out our corner here so that our units walk along the base of the mountain. Quickly fill this in. We've got connect this up with a another crossing to some of the path regions we did before. Clean that up there. And fill in along the river. The path regions go fairly quickly along here. But you might find, because they affect gameplay quite a bit, you might go back and tweak them afterwards to add new passes, or depending on how it plays. Actually, because we're recreating the map from an earlier game, it makes the process go a little bit quicker. So there's actually one more city up here we might draw in quickly. That was right up here in the paths. Oops, missed that corner again. Hegemony, I think. That there. Connect that up. And there was another river crossing here, so we're gonna rough that in. And then, if you might remember, there was a pass that went along the river here. And we will rough that in as well. Alright. And we'll flag that as a forward crossing too. Okay, well that quickly fills in all of our path regions for Lower Macedonia there. So now that we've got them in, we'll actually put the cities in those squares. So to do that, we switch over to city mode here. And that is how you place both buildings, forts, bridges, and cities. So we're going to go to City Common, which is the standard type of city that we place around the map. You can actually mod in new city types with different stats, but for Hegemony 3 we used a common city everywhere. And so selecting that on the left, using the draw tool, and left clicking in the square where you want the city to be. You can see it automatically places the walls around it. So we'll do that for that city. What's in there for that city? In there. Oh, there's Pella. And another city up there. Now what we'll also do while we're here is bridge. We have one common bridge type in Hegemony 3 as well, just listed as the wood bridge here. And we're going to fill that in. So even though these are fords, they're still possible to build a bridge there. So the well, you can't see the bridge at the moment. The extra blue rectangle there indicates the bridge has been built. Just in case you're wondering, the reason you can't see a bridge is there is because right now the game doesn't know which side the bridge, because there's no other region here, it doesn't know how to build the bridge. So I can draw in another pathfinding region there quickly. And if I drag corner update it, now you can see, now it knows where the bridge goes. Because the bridges try to find from one land region to another. So they need to be in a... There only needs to be 2 land connections in any corner where you want to build a bridge. So go back to the city mode here and we'll build our other bridge backed by a Gia. So select bridge here, switch to the draw tool, Put that in. Alright, now while we're doing that, we'll talk about a couple of the other little tricks for cities. Going back into the path region mode and selecting a region, there's a couple extra flags at the bottom here for no walls and no gates. Now you can see when you click these, they don't remove the land tag because they are an extra qualifier for the region. So those allow us to control a little bit how the city next to them is built. So if we switch no gate here and drag one of these corners, you can actually see it removes the gate from that wall. Which is even clearer if we go back to city mode, select the city, and we can test what the walls look like by using the wall level trigger here. So it's what the stone or wood walls look. So you can see there's no gate on that side. And these walls update dynamically so you can see how the towers appear, which does have an impact on the gameplay because it controls the number of siege points. So right now you hear with one tower in this segment there's 2 siege points there, but we can shrink it down so there's only 1, or widen it up so it gets 3 points there. So you can tweak those depending on how you want to see the how you want the gameplay to turn out. Now the other flag there you notice was the no wall, and we use that sometimes for particularly for regions up against mountains, where it doesn't necessarily make as much sense that they would build and guard a wall up against the mountains. So for example, if we did a little region here, you could select that, say no wall, and the city would not have a wall there. Now one trick with those that you also want to do is you don't really want units to move out there. So to specify that as a special wall, we actually click the blocked flag. So now that movement region just tells the game not to put a wall there, but it also tells it's blocked so units don't try to exit on that side. Okay, so the next thing we're going to touch on is forts and camps. Now the difference with those, unlike cities, forts and camps only appear, or more like bridges, only appear once the player has built them. So there's a few different ways to place those on the map. One we'll do right here. So you can place forts, like cities, take up an entire movement region. So when you have a point here where it's at the end of a region and we're not worried about units having to move around it, we can go to Fort Common, hit the draw tool, and add that there at the end. So that's going to be a fort. You can see clear when you zoom out on the strategy map. It's the different miniature. Until you start placing the props and buildings, they don't look much different on the 3D map. The other kind of region of camp is when you want players to be able to build it in the middle of a path region. And to do that, we use what we call secondary regions. And so secondary regions are only applicable when the fort is built. So to draw those, on the right side in path mode, we switch to edit secondary regions, hit our draw tool, and now this is where we subdivide an existing path region. So we'll go from the corners here. Actually, let's just draw the fort in the middle. So we're going to let players be able to build a fort right in the middle of this mountain pass. Now you can see that's purple, and that's the color of secondary regions. And then we want to connect that back up to our parent region. So secondary regions need to be entirely contained within a parent, and they need to connect to all of the edges of the parent. So basically, when the fort, and we'll build that here, Fort Common, click, put that in the middle. So when this fort is built, the pathfinding system uses these purple regions instead, so allow units to move around this fort rather than to go right through the middle. Now the third type of fort region uses the blocking system to put it off the edge of the map. So let's find a good spot. So this mountain pass here, say we want to be able to build a fort along the edge. So what we can do right here. edge here. So we build off a path region off the edge. Now because that's normally block terrain, we don't want units to be able to move there normally. So we set that as blocked. And then we place our fort right there. So players are allowed to build that fort and move in and out of it, but when it's not built, that's not, they can't move into that region. So that gives a way to be able to guard that mountain pass. It's good if you're attacking the city from this direction, you might want to build that fort first. It gives you supply points. One good way of testing that is if you go into the city mode and select the fort or city, you can see what its supply range will be. So it can give you a clue as to how close you want to place forts that you want to be able to use the supply points for attacking nearby cities. Before we go, one other quick thing on cities. I showed you how to do wall levels. There's also, for aesthetic reasons, just changing the look of the city, you can pick the faction style. So that's based on the faction mode, or the faction group, I mean, which we've shown a little bit in the modding on how you can create your own. So we're going to, you can recognize some of these from Hegemony 3, the Illyrics, the Greeks. We're going to use the Latin style. There we go. And you can also change what texture it uses. So you recognize the lighter stone that we used in the southern areas of the Hegemony 3 map. We're going to use the basic gray one though, because it matches more with the rocks in this part of the map. And that's about it. So now you know how to create path regions and to place cities and forts on that. And next episode we'll get into adding buildings, farms, and mines and resources around the map. And we'll get into starting to fill in decorating these cities and actually putting in units, civilians, workers, etc. Alright, thanks for joining us, and if you got any questions, please let us know in the forums. Alright, thanks.